this thing to work? And how did, like, who was your champion? How did your supervisor fund it? Who sort of stood in the way when people sort of tried to shut it down? Like, how did you get this thing to actually function so that everyone in the audience knows, okay, I gotta go back to my agency, wherever, if I wanna replicate a new idea, I've gotta do this to get it up and running. Joyce, do you think like this?
I think that I've been in the sector of working with high-risk youth for a very long time, and I think passion is at the base of everything that you just asked. I think that you need people who know how to get resources, obviously grant proposals, etc. You also need the frontline people who are willing to do that extra bit in order to test a new idea, to make it work.
How do you keep that motivator or interest at the front line? Like, what is that magic pill in a sense that keeps them energized?
Again, I think the passion is already there by virtue of who comes into the workforce, but I also think support at higher levels for sure, with regards to right from the executive director downwards in terms of supervision, in terms of supports, in terms of what do you need, in terms of responding to some of the vicarious trauma that happens for frontline staff in relation to working with high-risk populations.
That's cool.
Sure.
That's fine. Words of wisdom on this one?
I would add that I think relationship is really important. So building relationships with the people that you're working with, and the people that you want to engage, and the people that you want to shift.
Or how do you do the relationships with those, like, concretely? How do you actually get those relationships in the workplace with people? What makes that possible?
So I'll give you an example of the collaboration that we did. When we first went into it, we thought, well, we're going to do all these consultations, and it would be great, get all this information. And our First Nations communities were like, oh my God, not another consultation funded by the government. So what we had to do, so we had Sue, who was on our staff, so we brought her in, with the intent that she would provide or support us in providing a bridge. And then we met them where they were at. We went to their communities. We talked to them. We did some pilot work with some of the youth to show that we were really serious about this, and we want the youth voice to be heard, and we took some risks in our assessments. The justice system is very conservative in a lot of ways, and so putting song lyrics in a psychological assessment report is risky. But it turned out well in the end, and it showed to the community members that we were really serious about this, and we really want to do something different.
That's a great example.
I guess kind of stemming that, I think also like persistence. That sometimes we have these ideas in our mind of initiatives that would be great for the children and youth that we serve, and sometimes that might require external funding, applying for grants and stuff, and those aren't things that you always get. So just to also not be discouraged when those things don't happen, and then to continue pushing forward or try to be innovative in a different way that you can still do that program or the goal, just in another way.
Did you find support from those senior above you? That, I mean, if you failed once or twice, what I'm saying is it more systemic than just the individual saying, I'm going to keep doing this, or is there more systemic supports as well that you need?
I think systemic support, and also having that like organizational structure framework that also everyone's on that same page of continuing to try and working together, and kind of sometimes focusing on the positives, like Christine said, we're not always doing that, right? So it's easy to feel defeated when things aren't working, but to recognize what you're already doing well at is see that vision and then continue going forward with it.
Well, I was lucky to have a big grant, and the big grant funded the app creation. But the serendipity part, quite independent of the app, is because of the change in the law and the support to 17 and 18-year-olds, the CAS Foundation is doing a pilot project where they're purchasing cell phones for the 16 and 17-year-olds. So now they decided that part of their job in supporting transition out of care involved supplying cell phones, and it just happens to be a good, coinky-dinky fit for that.
Oh, that's very neat, because again, it's that complexity of saying, how are you going to get it? We don't often think about it. We're doing all the mental health interventions, and then someone forgets that actually they don't have a cell phone. I'm always amazed by those gaps in our reasoning, right? We're always keen on the program. Or, who is it mentioned transportation systems? Joyce, you set up a program, but somehow someone forgets that you have to get people there. I learned that from a former colleague, Andrew Nowicki, who since passed away here in Ontario, used to do a lot of wraparound work. And I remember him vividly telling me stories of how, you could get a person a job, and then it was getting a car company to donate a car, so the person could actually fulfill that dream and to actually get themselves out of poverty. It was an amazingly complex set of thoughts that had to go into that. So, would it be okay, or if we opened it up to I mean, people probably have their own, without, brief question, like concise a little bit, just to sort of, is there something you want to put into the conversation? Get one or two comments from the panel, something that will inspire, criticisms? Why don't we pass back? Would you mind if we just, you'll do your 10,000 steps here? Thank you very much.
Did you find, and this is to anyone, did you find in any of the circumstances that you had difficulty in getting the youth to buy in? What types of strategies and things did you have to employ to really get their buy-in?
I can just talk. We had two sorts of youth feed into our app. The first set of youth were youth with challenges with whom I had already worked with for 2 years. And so there was a relationship with a large group of youth in that agency. And then the second group of youth were youth from McMaster University that were interested in being app developers. And so they did a summer work study program on this.
We paid them. I mean, we pay the adults. Why wouldn't we pay the kids for their contributions? And they really appreciated that. They were very engaged, and yeah.
I would say that with ours, what's an interesting pattern is that we had actually more females participating than males, and I haven't quite figured out why that is, because in the at-risk population we're dealing with, it tends to be overrepresented with males. But with regards to the engagement, we had case managers who were asking for the assistance of the service coordinators. So the youth was already primed to get some support. But that didn't mean that we didn't have a lot of time and a lot of trouble engaging them because of the disorganization and the challenges in their lives on a daily basis. So that was the engagement challenge with the service coordinators more so, not so much that the youth didn't want the assistance or they supported the service coordinator, but rather just tracking down young people and having a continuity of support was the challenge.
Can we put another question? Can we put another question on here? And please.
I'm not sure I need the mic, but you've just been granted a new grant. What would you want to do next? Each panel member.
I can say I'm already doing it. We were successful, as Haley indicated, in obtaining another poverty reduction grant, a local poverty reduction grant, with regards to trauma-informed care, as she indicated. And I do think that that's the next level of support for the population that I'm involved with regards to court-involved young people and high-risk court trajectory types of youth.
Can you just describe that a little more concretely for folks? I mean, just like,
Haley touched on it, actually, with regards to the trauma-informed approach with regards to a DBT program piece. But in addition to that, we're going to also have a more intensive component where we identify a case response with regards to some of the young people, where we invite people who are part of that young person's life, whether that's a CAS person, a family member, a school professional, into the room to work with what's called the Interride, which is a screening tool that's used to identify areas of need. So we're going to work with that case circle around a young person to intensely wrap around, in a sense, a young person's needs and try to improve their performance and their ability to commit to schooling, which is our long-term plan in 3 years.
I would love another grant. And we have interest in taking our app and providing an Indigenous youth version that brings into the app relevant land-based learning games and an Indigenous specific keyboard for different languages. And the app developers tells us that the keyboard thing is easy peasy to do.
I guess kind of touching on what Joyce said and with the DDT program, even just extensions of that. So we have a lot of kids that we that come into our doors, and we may identify them as being great candidates for DBT work in the sense that they need a lot of those skills in the areas that I mentioned about emotion regulation and distress tolerance, but they're not quite ready yet to be in a group environment, or they're not quite ready to take something else on or think they need to change. So even if there was more individual counseling work that could go with those youth identified and working them towards being group ready. I think more funding towards doing that kind of initiative so that we can use an evidence-based approach like DBT to get the intended outcomes we want, but kind of amp up the scope of who we're reaching.
So I think for assessment, there's many avenues. I would love multiple grants to look at different aspects of it. But I think one thing we've heard in our collaboration is that they would like to, the First Nations communities would like to do their own work. So they'd like to have some capacity building done so that they can do some of the assessments themselves. And so doing some cross-training that way, I think they would really appreciate that. And I think then you see also more system change.
Money. Other questions? Oh, there's a woman back there. Would you like to introduce yourself? I realize we didn't get the former speaker to introduce themselves either, where you're from. Just the spirit of building a community here.
Okay, my name is Pat Pyle. I'm a family lawyer from Midland, and I do a fair bit of child protection work with parents. I'm wondering if you could comment on the balance that you try to strike in the trust that you're building with the youth in the trauma-informed kind of care, in the reports that you write as a young person, because those reports sometimes, get used in another context when they become young parents, potentially against the youth because of things that get written about them, by the assessors, or, a lot of information can sometimes get revealed. So how do you strike that balance, I guess, as you're working with youth in terms of what needs to get written to get their benefit for this particular purpose now that hopefully won't get used against them, in a later situation?
I think that is a great question. One of the barriers that sort of led to us wanting to do this kind of work is efforts by some to use Section 34 assessments in child welfare situations to show that the parent can't handle the young person because of everything that was contained in the assessment. There are some protections under the YCJ, of course, in the sense that those reports are not to be released without without the judge releasing them. So that does provide some protections. I think from our perspective, part of the collaboration is really moving away from risk and illness to wellness. And so laying out a wellness plan for the young person, what things need to be put in place for them to be well, instead of what are all the things that are going wrong with them. And then once you have those pieces, then it gives people a framework to move forward, to put those, us as society, to put those pieces in place, because a lot of those pieces so the youth can't put in for themselves, because it's outside of their control. It's the context that needs to be putting those pieces in place.
Yeah, I also am involved in Section 34 assessments, and I think that's a really hard balance to strike sometimes, but I do think transparency is a really important piece when working with young people Not everything you write will always be positive. There are some negative things, behaviorally, etc., that need to be outlined. But I think that the key is also to balance that with recommendations that make sense to a young person. And I think you can't sugarcoat bad things, but you certainly can look forward with hopefulness in your reports so that the young person can understand that they have an opportunity for doing different and improving their circumstances.
I would just add on the flip side, if you're looking at a parenting capacity assessment or custody and access assessment, for example, the other piece is to make sure that there's a balance on both sides. So not just to list all the things that are going wrong, but also to make sure you've done your due diligence to look at all the resiliency factors that the person has shown throughout their life, and to spend time on that, both interviewing them about it, looking in their context for it, and writing about it in your report.
Another comment or question from your own experience or to the panel? Thinking about it? Sure. Pass it back. If there's no other questions, we'll pass it back to
Thanks. Well, I'm feeling much more optimistic myself.